It rarely happens that two strong players are missing the same mate in one. Whenever they play a game, it can be that one of the players misses mate in one and then the game will just be over. But when two of the strongest blitz players in the world, Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura, are playing against each other, how big is the chance that both players are missing the same mate in one? Well, it actually happened in the final round game of the late Title Tuesday played on the 7th of May. Well, in the early edition of Title Tuesday, Magnus had been experimenting with this insane idea of playing a4 and after e5 sacrificing the rook. In a separate video, I've covered all of this new opening in chess, a big scandal. It's there. But in the late edition, he didn't go for this move, this new idea with a4. He went for the move e4 instead, and he's playing with the white pieces against Hikaru. This is going to be a very interesting game as well, with a lot of mistakes by both players, but you will get entertained. Don't forget, it is actually a blitz game, 3+1, which explains the number of mistakes. Don't forget also that they have played already a bunch of games before, so tiredness can also explain the mistakes by both sides. Anyway, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and here we go. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, the Spanish opening, Ruy Lopez, knight f6, the Berlin defense, d3, bishop c5. We quickly go through this opening because we have all been discussing this recently during the FIDE Candidates tournament, as after exchanging on d5, the bishop comes to c4 to hit the queen. Queen goes back to d8, now the pawn comes to b4, bishop goes back to e7, castling kingside, a6 is played, a4. Now the knight comes into d5, attacking the pawn on c3. But white simply defends it here with the move queen c2. And up to this point, both players, I'm pretty sure, they were familiar with this exact position. First of all, Hikaru had already played one game with this exact position in which he played the move bishop f5 against Abdusattorov in a game played at the Grand Chess Tour in Kolkata 2022. And it was also a game, in fact, played at the FIDE Candidates between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Alireza Firouzja. I covered it extensively on the channel, so you can look it up. Don't forget to do that. Well, back to the game. Here, Hikaru played the move rook e8, which is, of course, also a typical move in a lot of Italian, Spanish type of structures. The rook is ready to support the pawn on e5. But white will do the same. Put the rook on e1 to hit the pawn on e5. And how should black deal with it? Well, I believe that black is already having some small issues finding a good setup to deal with the potential pressure against this pawn. You may actually consider sacrificing it with something like bishop e6. White can take the pawn on e5, but not sure how great it is, because the bishop comes to f6, attacking the rook. If the rook goes away, the pawn on c3 will drop. So probably there are different ways of playing. Maybe a knight can come to e4. It's a typical position in which white is having somewhat more space on the queen side, pressure against the pawn on e5. I do fancy white's prospects here, but Hikaru had a different plan. Played the move bishop f8. So now the rook is protecting the pawn on e5. Also the knight and the rook, they both support that pawn. But there's a clear drawback, as white is able here to strike with the move d4. And black was really trying to prevent white from playing that move. So what is the idea? White is putting more pressure against that pawn. And unfortunately for black, there is no possibility here to take on d4. Because then the queen, which has the defensive duty of supporting both the rook and the knight, is overloaded. Rook takes rook, queen takes back, bishop takes d5, bye-bye piece. This is just winning for white. So therefore, black has to take some radical measures here and played here the move knight to b6, attacking the bishop. There are various ways of playing here, but if you delve deeper into the position, you see that white's pieces, they are actually quite nicely directed at the black king. And the machine even points out that the move bishop takes f7 is incredibly strong. I do understand that Magnus didn't play it though, because after king takes, you have to see that you can take the pawn on h7, That in itself, it's not too difficult to find, but you have to come up with ideas like queen h5 with the idea to prepare the knight coming into g5. And well, it's not like a forcing mate or so, but this king is just wide open, not being surrounded by that many pawns. The pieces are standing far away. So it's difficult position for black for sure. But Magnus played it in the slow way, played bishop to b3. And well, still there is quite some pressure here against f7. Black played the move queen f6 to support the pawn on e5, but then the knight comes in to e4, attacking the queen. Queen goes to g6. And it looks as if black has improved its position by bringing the queen to the king side. But the problem is white continues chasing black's pieces. a5 is a very useful insertion here to tickle this knight on b6. And, well, the knight doesn't have that many good squares to go to. It went to d7, but then the bishop on c8 can no longer be developed. Also, the rook will be suffering from the fact that the knight is misplaced there. But, 1 second. Instead of moving that knight away, can you play bishop h3, threatening checkmate? Well, of course, white can simply deal with this threat, but the simplest way, the strongest, the most powerful move is to play knight fg5. Attacking the bishop, preventing the queen from executing that mating idea. You're threatening bishop takes f7, pawn takes b6, winning the knight. Everything is hanging. So this is just an easy win. Just one thing you shouldn't do is take the knight because of queen takes g2 with checkmate. So anyway, now we understand why black played here the move knight to d7, but here white is pretty up in development, in fact, and it's very unpleasant position already. Knight h4, attacking the queen. Queen goes to h5, and what should be played here, guys? Well, a lot of interesting ideas. I think the move played by Magnus is simple and strong. Knight g5, threatening to take on f7, but give me the opportunity to show you one insane line pointed out by the machine. Bishop takes f7 is a crushing idea. If you do take with the queen that bishop, well, there will follow knight g5, attacking the queen and threatening checkmate on h7. If the queen goes to h5, then you give a check on b3. King goes into the corner. Then it's knight f7 check. Black will be forced to give up the queen here, but then you simply are a lot of material up. So king goes back to g8, knight h6, double check. And it's not even smothered mate, it's just normal mate on g8. Fantastic attacking display by white. Well, therefore you can't take with the queen. If you do take with the king though, you can give a check with your queen again. And if you block with your rook, I mean, you cannot block with any other piece. There's knight g5 check, and the rook will drop. The alternative is to go away with the king, but now really strong is knight g3 with a powerful threat against the queen. You cannot take on h4 because of knight f5, and the queen will be lost anyway. And well, there are some other possibilities as well. But otherwise, bishop can come in, a knight can come to f5. Just a crushing attack here for white. So, but you have to calculate it all in a blitz game. That's not easy at all. Therefore, knight g5, I believe, is the much more human continuation, with the point that this knight on h4 can't be taken. You take on f7, knight supports the bishop, bishop captures with check, king goes into the corner, and you capture the rook, game over. So, black has to defend here with the move knight d8. That's a very sad move. On the other hand, well, the threats have been parried here at the moment. So, the knight on h4 is now hanging. So, therefore, the knight comes back to f3. And here, probably the most shocking moment of today. It's Hikaru playing the move h7, h6, attacking the knight. He wants to get rid of that annoying knight, which is putting pressure against that pawn on f7. And Magnus just goes back with a knight to e4. And we are all in shock, because let's go back 1 second. What can white play here? I give you 3 more seconds, and it's actually not too difficult, because there is just mate in 1. Queen h7. This is checkmate in 1. Overlooked by Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Absolutely bizarre. I cannot recall having seen a similar moment. I mean, you see sometimes one strong player overlooking mate, but it doesn't happen to both players. But how is this mistake made? Well, I think it's because you're in a very unpleasant situation. You are under pressure. You want to get rid of one of the strongest pieces on g5. And here, in this exact situation, the queen is still defending the pawn on h7. So you think that everything is under control. But by moving the pawn one square forward, the queen no longer covers the mating square. Queen h7 is checkmate. The queen on h5 is not a defender in this case. Remarkable moment, but the game goes on. Knight e4 was played. The queen comes back to g6. And well, Magnus, he believes that he's in a very comfortable situation. And that's probably sometimes one of his main flaws in his play, if you can talk about his mistakes. I believe that he really believes that he is positionally winning here. And therefore, he stops looking for tactical opportunities. And he probably even didn't believe that somebody of Hikaru's strength would make such a big blunder. So then that's what happens. Your opponent makes a big blunder, but you don't expect it. You're not looking for it at all. Well, Magnus goes knight g3. And this is trademark Magnus style. He just wants to get the queens off the board and says that the pawn on e5 is still in big trouble. Well, black tries to fight back, getting the knight to c6, supporting with the knight the pawn on e5, bishop to a4, adding more pressure to this diagonal. And after bishop d6, black is trying to hold on to that pawn. The knight comes into f5, knight comes to f6. Still, white has plenty of options, but he should realize that the knight is under threat. There's one cool tactic. That's just to take the pawn on h6 with check. If you take it, bishop takes knight, eliminating a defender of the pawn on e5. You can take on e5 and you're going to win a pawn while the pawn formation of black is totally shattered. So that is a good idea. Didn't happen. Knight takes d6 was played in the game. C takes d6, but in a way you can see it as a small improvement for black to trade off pieces here. So pawn takes, c takes d6, pawn takes e5, d takes e5, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and white just captures on e5. He is a healthy pawn up, but there are in chess a lot of endgames with one extra pawn which are simply not enough to convert. Bishop g4, black is playing actively here, and well, the bishop comes out to e3. Maybe other moves are possible as well. Bishop takes f3. You can't take back because the rook is hanging. So therefore white first captures on e8. Rook takes, g takes f3, knight e5, bishop to d2. Not that simple. I mean, black may consider a move like c5 here to get rid of this pawn weakness and play the move rook c8 with ideas to generate play against these two pawns. I mean, white is clearly better and has still good winning chances, at least practically. But it was not played. Rook d8 was played in the game. And here, Magnus, once again, he is not tactically alert here. He just plays the move king f1. Blundering his extra pawn. Overlooking this tactic with knight takes b4. How on earth is this possible? Missing mate in one, then blundering another pawn back. C takes b4, rook takes d2. Even rook endgame. But the game goes on. Rook c1. These two pawns are still quite vulnerable. So white is trying to win the pawn on c6 and then the pawn on a6. If I were playing black, maybe I would consider rook d6. Try to bring the king. Probably should be a draw. But active play is also possible. Rook d4. So you give up. The pawn on c6. Rook takes b4. Take on a6. White is a pawn up. But black gets its rook on its ideal post behind the passed pawn. King e2. Rook a3. Great move. Keeping an eye on this pawn. White's kingside formation is not looking great, so this is a theoretical draw. Black has different ways of playing, should try to activate the king. First, g5 was played. Hikaru wants to force play here. Not sure that's the best practical way of handling this position, but it's possible to trade off as many pawns as possible. Here, white takes on h6, rook takes a5, and it's rook h5, and you're pinning the pawn on g5. So white is going to win a pawn. Rook a2 check, king f3, g takes f4. Material's even, But rook g5 check, king h7, rook g4, and you see that this pawn is gone. It will be a 2 versus 1. And that is a theoretical draw, especially for these two guys. We would normally expect nothing to be happening here. But Hikaru once again to force the issue with a move f5, expecting that if you do take, there's king g6 and everything is alright. But rook g5 is a much more clever, practical attempt, keeping the rook cut off. After rook a3, there is king takes f4. And not sure this is the best way of playing. By the way, instead of this move rook check, maybe rook a5 is a good move to defend the pawn. If you take on f4, then the rook comes back to a2. And it's very difficult to make progress here for white. Because if you lose the other pawn, then it's just going to be a very easy draw. But Hikaru played rook a3, king f4, rook h3. But now the rook comes back to g2, defends both the pawns, rook h5. And here you see the king is still cut off and not able to support the pawn on f5. King e5, king h6, f4. All of a sudden, it's starting to look more and more unpleasant because the pawn is gone. Rook h3, playing actively. Now it's f&h pawn. It's also still a theoretical draw. But you see, Hikaru showed very poor technique in this game. Still a theoretical draw. And white is trying to improve its position. Brings up the pawns to generate threats, improve the king. Black is defending here. Game goes on. It's a blitz game. All these moves are played pretty fast. King comes to g5, rook g1. King comes in front, so you're ready to push the pawn. Rook a1, f5, rook a6, checks from the side. King goes back. White is about to improve the rook here. So rook a1, rook h4 to be able to meet rook g1. Checks from behind with blocking the check. Rook g4, rook a1, rook e4. Here we see the rook is coming to the side. Rook g1, king f6. You can't, of course, take that pawn because of checkmate. So rook a1 is played again. Rook e8. Still the pawn can't be taken because of rook h8. Rook a5 played here, trying to attack the pawn from the side. And here, apparently, well, king g5 is all of a sudden it's a winning move. That's not easy to see from afar. But the idea is that after rook a1, you're too late. Rook e7, king g8 and f6. And these two pawns, they are too strong. It's all too late. One of them will be promoted very soon. What should black have done? Well, not rook a5, but play here the move rook b1. So that if the king ever comes back to g5, you can still give a check from behind. That is the way of playing here. It is a draw, but as you can see, it's not easy at all. Magnus didn't play king g5 here, played king e6. And still, if you take on h6, now there's no mating threat. This is a theoretical draw. If you can just wait from the side, you're not able to make progress because there are checks from the side and the rook covers the pawn on f6. Well, theoretical draw, but not in Title Tuesday. Rook a6 check, king f7, rook a5, f6. And now the f pawn is too strong. After king takes, king f8, rook a7, it's f7, and the pawn is out of reach. White is about to go king g8 and promote the pawn. King h7, rook e7. Well, that's not maybe not the most useful move because after check, you're not making progress. Therefore, first, you got to move the rook one square to the side. If you're approaching with the king, intending to eliminate the pawn, it's rook d6 check, king goes away, and it's king g8 followed by f8 queen. Well, instead, rook a2 was played, but now the king is able to walk out from that promotion square. f8 queen is on the agenda. King g6, well, that's not helping at all. f8 queen, one more check. King d7, another check. And here you can just run away with the king. You can also play the sadistic move, queen d6, so that you're solving the check. Black is forced to take on d6, and it's king takes d6. Black is going to lose it. So that's after queen d6, black resigned this game. I mean, it's not too strange that Magnus beats Hikaru, but the number of mistakes is surprising. But especially this moment, we will remember this for quite a bit of time. Overlooking mate in one, both by Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. That is something we don't see that often. Let me know what you think of this game. Hit the subscribe button, give this video a like. If you like this video, you may even consider a small donation via my PayPal account in the description above. Thanks for doing that, and stay tuned for more exciting videos on this channel, Robert Rist Chess.